Today, we're diving into a foundational concept in early reading instruction, reading and spelling words with the closed syllable type. So this syllable type sometimes is referred to as the CVC syllable, but for reasons that are going to become crystal clear in just a little bit, we will refer to this as the closed syllable type throughout this video. Now, this is going to be a true crash course where we're not only going to talk about basic words that fit this syllable type, but we're also going to talk about the exceptions to the closed syllable types and decoding rules that you'll want to know before you try to teach it to beginning readers. But before we jump in, if you're new here, my name is DiGilio. I was a primary teacher for 23 years. On this channel, we talk about all things reading instruction, structured literacy, and really digging into the research behind the science of reading. So if you are new to my channel, I would love you to click that little subscribe button and that little bell next to it so you're alerted every time one of my new videos goes live. So before we really dig in, let me help you kind of get your bearings on when this skill might actually be taught. Let's say your students have learned their alphabetic principle or the alphabetic principle, and they know their alphabet, and they know the most common sound each consonant represents, and they know their short vowel sounds. Now what? Well, this is where reading instruction really gets exciting. At this point in a student's learning journey, they're ready to start reading and actually spelling words. Usually we begin teaching students how to read by blending words with a closed syllable type. And we start this part of the journey with word mapping. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the basics of teaching students how to map words, which is really a crucial step in a student's journey to learning how to read. And we're also going to discuss what a closed syllable is, including closed syllable words with blends and digraphs, and how to map those words with closed syllables. And I'll also touch on some spelling rules that come in handy when working with closed syllable words. So first and foremost, let's talk about what is a closed syllable. Whether you're a seasoned teacher or you're really just getting started, understanding the closed syllable type is really key to helping our young readers really build their skills with confidence. And did you know that approximately 50% of the syllables in the English words are actually closed syllables? This makes the closed syllable type the most common syllable type in the English language. So, what exactly is the closed syllable? Often in early reading instruction, we refer to this closed syllable as the CVC syllable type. And CVC stands for consonant, vowel, consonant. And it's a pattern where a consonant is followed by a short vowel and then another consonant. And the vowel is closed in by the consonants, showing that the vowel that's in the middle represents the short sound. So think of words like cat, dog, sun, right? These are coded as CVC words, and the CVC will sometimes go on top of those words. Let me just show you just a quick example of what I mean. So if we were looking at the word cat, and we talked about how this is a CVC word, and you're looking at the word cat written down, it would be coded as CVC. That's what we mean when we're coding a word, all right, or a syllable type. It's a CVC word. That's where that comes from. Consonant, vowel, consonant, right? So what we need to do is we need to think of the closed syllable, though, in a broader sense, as one vowel followed by one or more consonants. So one vowel followed by one or more consonants, because it doesn't just have to be one final consonant at the end. There are some examples of words that are closed syllables, right? But they aren't necessarily coded with the CVC pattern that we just talked about. This particular word, cat, is a CVC word. But let's talk about the VC words, like the word if and at. If we're looking at the words if and at, we have if and we have at. This is called a vowel consonant, or VC, vowel consonant, VC syllable. But but it's closed in, right? So that short vowel is closed in by that final consonant. This is a VC syllable type, but it's also still part of that CVC that we're talking about. But we code it as VC above each of those letters in the word. But let's talk about blends like stop, tent, and stomp, right? So these are also actually considered closed syllable words, but they're not coded as CVC, but they are closed syllable words. Let's look at the word stop. So stop is a consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, CCVC. This is a closed syllable. Let's think about the word tent. So tent is consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, CVCC. Also a closed syllable. Let's talk about the word stomp. So stomp, what we have is we have a blend in the beginning and a blend at the end. This is a CCVCC. That's how you code that word. But again, these are all closed syllable words, and the vowel has its short sound. So that's why it's important that you have to understand that words with blends and digraphs are also considered closed syllables. If we're thinking about digraphs, we could think about the word, let's say, shrimp. Here we have shrimp, right? So shrimp is also a closed syllable type, but here we have consonant, 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 vowel, consonant, consonant. That's how that's coded. But again, it's considered a closed syllable. Same thing like with the word hung and fluff. These are all closed syllable words, and they have the short vowel here. But again, it's not just one letter or one consonant at the end. So even though these words don't fit the exact CVC pattern, they each represent one vowel followed by one or more consonants, causing the vowel to represent its short sound, which means it's a closed syllable type. So additionally, when you're teaching this syllable type to your young readers, you'll run into some really tricky words that do not follow the standard consonant syllable rules. These exceptions are really going to pop up as you start teaching these procedures, and you want to make sure they go smoothly. So you want to make sure you have a solid understanding of these exceptions. So if you've been looking into a crash course on closed syllable types, you're in the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through how to approach mapping closed syllable words, including all of those little nuances to this particular syllable type. First, we have to jump into what is word mapping. That's what we're going to jump into now. A quick note first about word mapping before we dive in. If you're new to word mapping, what we're going to do is have a quick overview. Word mapping is a phonics teaching technique that we use to help students connect the sounds or phonemes they hear in words with the corresponding letters or groups of letters, which are called graphemes, that represent those sounds in writing. So when a student can identify a word's sounds, letters, and meaning, they can successfully store that word in their orthographic lexicon, which is just a very fancy way of saying that they can add that word to their mental storage of written words that they can recognize on sight and spell correctly based on their visual memory of those words. That's their orthographic lexicon, kind of like a sight word vocabulary, also known as. So as students add more words to their orthographic lexicons, they become more fluent readers. Here's the good news. We can actually help students add words to their mental storage system through word mapping. So I'm going to be showing you various examples of word mapping using various tools that I have, and we're going to talk about various types of closed syllable words. But essentially, word mapping follows these steps. All the time, they are the same steps. Okay, the first step when word mapping, students have to first listen to a word. So let's say the word is cat. The students repeat that word, cat. They would then say, let's really think about the phonemes in the word cat, and let's tap it out. K, a, cat, right? So we have k, at. How many sounds are in the word cat? There are 3 phonemes or sounds in the word cat. So what they would do, what the students would do, I'm just using a word mapping paddle. You could do it on a whiteboard. You could do it on a mapping mat. Also, I have a freebie for you down in the description as well. So we know cat has 3 phonemes. We have 3 here. So we have k, at. Now what we do is we say each phoneme or sound as we push the disc. So we're doing a physical movement, aligning it with the sound that the student is saying. So we go k, a. Now, after the students say, okay, there are 3 phonemes or sounds, and we push those up, let's figure out the graphemes that are associated with those 3 sounds or phonemes. So the first sound was k. What letter or grapheme, use those words with your students, has the k or represents the k sound? And they would say, hopefully C. And then if they bring up K, you can talk about that as well. And you can also bring up the rule about when to use C versus K. We're not going to get into that right now, but there are rules for that. Now, the next phoneme was A. What letter represents the A sound? A, K, A. And the last sound we brought up was T. What grapheme represents the T sound? T. And make sure you don't add that schwa to the end of T and say T, right? We always want to be super clean with our phonemes. Sometimes we tend to add that schwa on like t or b or p, right? We want to just make sure we say the actual tight phoneme sound of that specific letter. So then the students write out the word because they've already mapped the sounds to the graphemes or the letters that they've identified. This is word mapping. It's very, very simple activity. Let's talk about the tools that students need in order to word map. Now, there's lots of different things you can do in the classroom to do word mapping with your students. You can use tools like this. These are our word mapping paddles that we have that you can use to word map. These are great when you're doing word mapping with whole class because they're magnetic and your little counters are not going to fall. And it's really easy for students to do their work on their paddle and then hold it up for you to see if you're in the front of the classroom doing a whole group word mapping. You could also use these in small groups. That's what our teachers in our community have done. They've used it whole group and small group. So you could use a word mapping paddle just like this. These are also available on Amazon as well. So definitely check them out. They're called Mappets. These are our word mapping paddles. So definitely check those out. I'll put a link for you in the description below. Additionally, you could use a word mapping mat like this, where it's flat on the table with your students working on it. I just have it up here so you can see it, but it's very easy for students to do word mapping where they'll bring up their little counters, same way, cat, k, at. There's 3 sounds. So we bring up 3 sounds into our boxes, and now we go up each sound. K, at. And then you write. You can laminate these so students can use these with a dry erase marker. Mine is not laminated at this time, but you can absolutely laminate this. And I have a freebie for you down in the description below. So definitely check out that freebie for this mapping mat for you to use in your classroom. You could also use a plain whiteboard. And I know we all have those in our classrooms as well. So you could use a plain whiteboard. You could have students draw squares based on the sound. So if you're saying, how many sounds do you hear in the word cat? K, at. You could say, I want you to draw 3 squares for the 3 sounds in cat. Now that we know there are 3 sounds in cat, let's think about the graphemes or letters that represent that. What represents the k sound? C. What represents the a sound? A. What represents the t sound? T. So you can do it on a blank whiteboard as well. There's lots of different ways to do word mapping. So these are just 3 tools that you could use right now in your classroom doing word mapping with your students. You can look up these. Again, you could look these up on Amazon. They're called our Mappets, word mapping paddles. Teachers are loving them. So do I. Again, you can get a freebie down below in the description, or you could just use a simple whiteboard. Now, one other thing I want to show you, this is exciting because this is the first time. This is actually a prototype of a product that we have coming out really, really soon. It is a word building mat. We are very excited about this. This is a prototype. Don't look at the colors because it won't have these colors, but it is a prototype and it's coming out really soon. So based on when you're watching this, definitely check below for our word building kits down in the description, because when they are launched, they're going to be amazing for teachers. We not only have word mapping on here and allowing opportunity for students to write on here with word mapping, we also have letter tiles and letter tiles with different types of blends and digraphs and vowel letter tiles as well. So that lots of word mapping abilities on here on these new magnetic word building kits. And again, this is just our prototype, but we are really, really excited for this to launch and go live. And not only will there be word building and word mapping in here, we are going to have opportunities for students to write and build with magnetic letters on the front, and we have syllable mapping on the back. So again, this is just a prototype. We are in the process of having these manufactured and built for us, and we are very, very excited about this. So again, this is just our prototype, but it's coming out very, very soon. So definitely check the description below for a link to this product, because it is going to be a game changer for teachers in the classroom when it comes to really digging in to the research behind the science of reading and structured literacy with word mapping and building words with magnetic letters. And we're super excited about this new product that's coming out soon. So definitely take a look in the description below for the link. It's going to be such a versatile tool for teachers that are jumping into structured literacy, and they'll have everything at their fingertips for word mapping and word building and really focusing on phonemes and graphemes and how they go together, and really help students build out their orthographic lexicon, which is also their sight word vocabulary in that part of the brain. So stay on the lookout for this new one. I'm excited about it. It's going to be a really exciting product for us because we are currently building it out and we're really excited about it. So just a little aside there. So what I want to do now is we're going to jump into more of understanding the closed syllable type now that you understand word mapping. All right, so let's dive into specific examples and talk about how we can help our students really begin to understand the closed syllable type through word mapping. Now, I'm going to use my word mapping paddles because it's just easy to demonstrate. But again, this freebie is for you in the description below, and it's just easier for me to use a magnetic demonstration tool for this. So a great place to start when you're talking about closed syllables is really mapping the VC syllable. Now, these are exactly what they seem like: a vowel followed by a consonant. Words like at, if, and up. Now remember, closed syllables are one vowel followed by one or more consonants. And these words represent that definition exactly. They're closed syllable words with a short vowel that is followed by at least one consonant. Now, if students generally understand the concept of closed syllable words, they could easily learn these two letter words together. So let's look at how we map the word up. So if we're thinking about the word up, again, super simple way. The students repeat after me. Students say the word up, up. Let's tap out the sounds we hear in up. P. And I love to have them tap on their desk, tap on their paddle, tap on their arm, have them tap, have them do a kinesthetic activity or bring that kinesthetic approach into the activity. So we have two sounds in the word up. So we say the word, we tap the word. So we know we have two sounds in the word up. So students will put two of the magnetic discs up into the squares. Now, each sound corresponds directly to one letter. So next, the students identify the letters that represent the sounds and write them in the spaces where they had just tapped out the sounds or again on this paddle. So we'll say Now the students will write the graphemes that represent those phonemes. So we're going to write the U, then the grapheme, for P, for P. So we have a. Now you can have them code this. Now this is a closed syllable because it has one vowel and it is closed in by a consonant, and we can code this as a vowel consonant. This is the VC. This is how we code a VC or vowel consonant word. That's it. It's that simple. And now do this with other words. In, at, as. Again, bring in words though that as has that Z sound for S. So bring in easy vowel consonant words that really stick with the sounds that they already have explicitly learned. That's super important. Now, once students have mastered these VC words like up, is, at, right? We want our students to really map simple, rule-following closed syllables because the short vowel is closed in by a consonant. Super simple understanding. Then have students move into CVC words like cat, pig, hen, run. These are all closed syllable words. Let's do the word pig. We have students repeat after me. Say the word pig, pig. Now let's tap it out. P-I-G. How many sounds do you hear? 3 sounds. Let's bring up our counters. We have 3 sounds in the word pig, and let's push them up as we say the phonemes or sounds. P-I-G. What letter represents the P sound? Again, don't go P, say P. We have P. Good. What letter or grapheme represents the I sound? I. And then what letter represents the G sound? G. So pig is a closed syllable because that short vowel is closed in by the consonant. And this is a CVC syllable type. Do some of these with your students so they understand the VC syllable, then move into the CVC syllable, and they can start to see how these words are closed in, or this syllable is considered closed because it's always closed in by a consonant or multiple consonants, and the vowel is always short. And again, the CVC syllable type is great really to begin with because they're straightforward, they're predictable, and as mentioned before, they make up a very, very good portion of the written and spoken language in English. So it's great to really solidify these with your students and really, really practice them. So let's look at how we map different words that don't follow the CVC coding, right? Let's go a little bit deeper. Maybe words that have more than one consonant at the end. So that's really important also. Now, one thing I want to talk about with this is word mapping words that end in S. When I teach the closed syllable type, I don't want to wait too long before I teach that ending S that we can add to words at the end. So if students have letter sound knowledge and they are solid on decoding that VC and CVC words, they can usually handle tacking on an S at the end of words. So consider teaching students how to map the plural closed syllable words as well. And you'll also want to point out and acknowledge that that letter S can represent the Z sound sometimes. Again, I like to introduce this early, and as soon as students have mastered adding a simple S to the ends of words, it's just important, and I think it's an easy add-on. But remember, we have to really hit home that S can have that Z sound like in the word his or is. So when mapping these words, you still need to follow the closed syllable structure, but you need to explain to students that that S sometimes makes a Z sound in some cases. So I really like to bring adding in that plural S as well, because I think it's important because students are going to see that, and bringing it into a mapping activity after you're doing a CVC word like pig or cat, adding in that final S is just kind of easy to bring that in. Again, this is if your students can handle it, and you'll know that based on their ability to map VC or CVC words. So you decide when it is a good time to bring in that plural S when you're showing closed syllables. Now, let's talk about mapping blends. So when things get a little bit more complex and you're dealing with words that have blends, we need to really talk about it. Now, blends are two or more consonants that appear side by side in a word while keeping their individual sounds. Now, closed syllable words often contain blends. Now remember, closed syllable words contain one vowel followed by one or more consonants that they can have after the vowel sound. And again, the vowel in these syllables always represents their short sound, right? Well, not always. We have always exceptions, right? So that's important. Now, there are closed syllable words with initial blends like stop or frog, so they have those initial blends. We also have closed syllable words with ending blends like lost or lump, and we have words that have beginning and ending blends like clump and splint. So let's look at how we map a word with a beginning and an ending blend. So let's look at the word clamp. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna say, students, repeat after me, say the word clamp. And the students repeat that, clamp. Now, tell them, this is a trickier one. Let's think about how many sounds we hear in the word clamp. We hear k, l, a, m, p. They hear 5 sounds. Now again, sometimes they're gonna blend those together and they might say, oh, there's only 4 sounds. But do it multiple times because words that have beginning blends and ending blends could be difficult. So there are 5 sounds in the word clamp. So let's move it up. 5 sounds in the word clamp. Now, as we move up our magnetic discs, now we're going to say, okay, let's think about the grapheme that represents each phoneme or the letter that represents each sound. What's the first sound we hear in clamp? We hear k. What's the second sound? What's the second grapheme or letter? We hear oo, k, oo, a, m, clamp. Now let's talk about the graphemes associated with those sounds. What was the first sound? K. We hear the k sound, and that's with a C. Again, you might want to talk about C and K and when you use those letters or those graphemes. What's the second letter or sound we hear in clamp? We hear oo, k, oo. We hear oo and the letter L. What is the third sound? Eh. Now remember that A is being followed by a nasal sound, which is that it's that nasal sound. So that A doesn't have a typical crisp ah, like in cat. It has that sound because it's a nasal A or a nasalized A. So we have an A here. Then what's that fourth sound? K, l, a, m, letter M, and then p. Now notice that word clamp, right, has a beginning blend and an ending blend, but it's still a closed syllable. So let's actually code that. We have consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant. Again, notice it's one vowel sound and we have a short vowel and it's closed in by 2 consonants here. So this is mapping a word that has beginning blend and an ending blend. So again, we want to point out to the students, this is a closed syllable word because it's closed in by 1 or more consonants and the vowel is still a short vowel sound. So this is considered a closed syllable. Okay, now we want to move on to mapping a word that has a digraph in it. So these consonant digraphs are 2 consonants that are together but represent 1 sound. So some common examples of digraphs include the consonants in these words like CH, SH, TH, CK, PH, WH, FF, LL, SS, ZZ, right? Those are all digraphs as well, because even though they follow that floss rule, they're still considered digraphs. So now what we're going to do is we're going to word map a word that has a digraph in it. Let's choose the word chop. for mapping a word with a consonant digraph. So if we're thinking about the word chop, we want to say the word chop, chop. The students repeat after me, chop, chop. Let's count out the sounds. Ch, ah, p. We hear 3 sounds. Let's move up our 3 counters. We hear 3 sounds. We move up our 3 counters. What's the first sound we hear in the word chop? We hear ch. Let's move it up and say it. Ch. What's the second sound or phoneme we hear in chop? Ah. Let's move it up as we say it. Ah. What's the next phoneme or sound we hear? Remember, don't say p and correct them if they do it. Ch, ah, p. Now, let's go back and figure out what letters or graphemes correspond or represent these sounds. What letters represent the ch sound in chop? We have CH. So we're going to write that CH in one box. We're going to write it in one box because it represents one sound. And then the second sound is ah. What letter represents the ah sound? O. And then we have p. What letter represents the p sound? Is P. So we have ch, ah, p. Now this one is also mapped as a consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant. So it's a CCVC word. But even though it has that one sound, we're still coding it as a CCVC word, but let's look at it again. That short vowel is closed in by the consonant. So this is a closed syllable, again, because the word is closed in by that final consonant and that vowel sound has a short vowel. This is a closed syllable. As long as our students know the digraphs, the short vowels, and the blends, they can absolutely map these words. So that's how you map a word with a digraph in it. And if your digraph is at the end, it's the same thing. Let's do this. Let's talk about a word with a digraph on the end. Let's talk about the word chick. So if you're looking at the word chick, we've got a couple of different sounds there. We've got a digraph in the beginning and we've got a digraph at the end. Ch, I. Still 3 sounds, right? But we're going to have a lot more letters here. So we'll say ch, I, k. We have 3 sounds. What letters make that first sound? Ch. We have CH. What letter or graphemes represent that I? We have that I. Now we have that k at the end, that final k at the end. What letters does that represent? And sometimes they'll say K. But remember, we're going to do this after we've explicitly taught these digraphs. It's important. So we're teaching the CK here, right? So we have CH and CK at the end. It's still going to be coded as a consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant. That's the CCVCC coding of this word. But again, it's still a closed syllable because that short vowel is being closed in by one or more consonants at the end. So it's still considered a closed syllable. So as you can see, mapping closed syllable words is so much more than just CVC words like cat and pig and dog, right? Students might quickly progress to more advanced words. So that's really, really important. Now, once students have learned how to map several syllable types, you'll eventually move on to teaching multisyllabic words as well. Now, often multisyllabic words with closed syllable type are among the first to be taught when students are learning multisyllabic words. So when applying the closed syllable type to multisyllabic words, I really recommend beginning with simple compound words, 2 closed syllable words that are easy to syllabicate, then moving into words with 2 closed syllables that are not compound words, like these compound words like cobweb or candid or mascot. These are really easy words to do at the beginning for multisyllabic words because they're CVC words and they're compound words. So this is a great way to move into multisyllabic words, but make it really easy for the students. The big difference between mapping single syllable words and multisyllabic words is that students first begin by counting the number of syllables in a word. Every syllable in a word has a vowel sound, right? So one way to figure out how many syllables a word has is having students count how many vowel sounds they hear in a word, which is what we talked about in our first video about syllables. So for the word cobweb, students hear 2 vowel sounds, ah and eh, ka-a-ab, we-e-eb. They hear 2 vowel sounds, so they know it's a 2-syllable word. And what they could do is they can draw 2 lines for each syllable. Let me give you an example. So a way to do this is when you're thinking about multisyllabic words, you could say, how many syllables are in the word cobweb? You could have them clap it out. Cobweb. Tap it out. Cobweb. There's 2. Cobweb. Have them draw the lines that represent how many syllables are in it. So if you're thinking about the word cobweb and you're mapping it, it's easy to do this first. If we're thinking about the word cob, there are 3 sounds in the word cob. K, ah, b. So students can tap out those sounds, k, ah, b, and we know it has 3 sounds. And next, the students can identify the letters, again, that represent k, ab, and write them. K, ah, b. They could write them on the line. So if we're mapping out this multisyllabic word as cobweb, they could start with the first syllable, cob. Then they can move their attention to the next syllable or the second syllable, which is web. W, e, b. Has 3 sounds. Students tap it out. W, e, b. And then they say, okay, what letters or graphemes represent web? W, w, e, b. So they wrote cobweb. And then have them put it together and write it. Cob, web. So using compound words, starting with compound words, what I'm saying is a much easier way to start with multisyllabic words because they're easy to do because they both have closed syllables. So this is a fun, easy way of moving into multisyllabic words really, really easily. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about tricky words. So words that appear to be closed syllables but do not actually follow the closed syllable decoding rules. For example, the vowels in some closed syllable words do not actually represent their short sounds. Sometimes they represent their long sound or an entirely other sound altogether. Now, you wouldn't want to teach all these exceptions to students all at once. No way. In fact, each of these skills should really occur in different units, even different grade levels in curriculums. Remember, the purpose of this video is to give you a crash course in closed syllable types so you can really best choose the words and examples that you'll use when you're teaching it to young readers. Remember, this is not something you're going to do all in one lesson. That would confuse the heck out of our students, and we don't want to do it. So let's start talking and discussing the nasal A, which is what we brought up in the word clamp, which is usually taught early on in phonics, typically alongside the regular short A words or sound. Think about words like apple, hat, cab, ant, ham, can. Those are typical short A words. Do you notice in these examples that the short A has 2 different sounds, right? Think about that again. Let's review those again. We've got apple, hat, cab, ant, ham, can. Do you notice those examples have different short A sounds? One short A we hear at the beginning of the word like apple, and in the middle of the words like hat and cab, they all have that ah sound, right? That short A sound. But short A has a second sound and it sounds like a whine. They call it like that whiny A. It's called the nasal A. And we hear it when an A is followed by an M or an N, like in the words ant, ham, can. When mapping these words, we still treat them as closed syllable words, but it's really, really helpful to point out that that vowel A sounds a bit different due to that nasal influence in that sound. Another time a vowel sound in a closed syllable is affected is when you see words ending in ing, ang, ong, ung, I-N-K, A-N-K, O-N-K, U-N-K. Those glued sounds, like in the words ring, fang, long, hung, sink, bank, hunk, junk. Those words have those glued sounds at the end. When a closed syllable ends with NG or NK, the preceding vowel sound can be affected and have more of that nasalized A, It really changes. So in many dialects, the I's and the A's will seem to represent their long sounds, and the U's might sound like they're more drawn out, like and the O's might take on more of an aw sound. Again, this can depend completely on your dialect. So really pay special attention on how these vowels are spoken in your area and how the students and how you're pronouncing them as well. When you map these word parts, you really want to point out the vowel sound represented in your region and explicitly teach that pronunciation for it. That's really super, super important because dialect absolutely plays a big, big part in pronunciation of sounds in the alphabet. So really important. Next, let's touch on closed syllable exceptions like ILD, OST, OLD, IND, OLT. These are words like mild, host, told, kind, bolt. Notice that these words follow the pattern for closed syllable words, but the vowels represent their long sounds. And when you map these words with students, you really need to draw special attention to vowel sounds and make sure you explicitly explain that vowels in words with these specific endings often represent their long vowel sound. So it's really important that students understand these differences in these kind of glued sounds at the end. Now let's talk about words ending in ALL, OLL, and ULL, such as the words ball, troll, and pull. Think of the words ball and troll and pull. And again, think about it because this is another kind of regional dialect situation. In many dialects, the vowels in these words do not represent the short sound we would normally expect, right? So when you map out words with all, and ul, you'll want to point out how the vowel sounds is represented in your region and explicitly teach the pronunciation for these special vowel combinations. Because look, I'm in New York, right? You know we have that aw sound going on with coffee and bowl, right? We have that aw sound going on. So it might be said very, very differently. Some of my friends, my online friends that live in all different parts of the country always love chatting with me when I say coffee because we've got that aw sound and they're like, say it again. But you've got those regional dialects that that have to be taken into consideration when you're teaching vowel combinations and vowel sounds. It's just so important. With that being said, lastly, let's talk about our controlled vowels, which can again also be closed syllable word impostors, right? So if you're new to word mapping, words like for and star can especially be tricky. They're tricky words, and when we're word mapping, these can be tricky words. At first glance, these words appear to follow a closed vowel pattern with a single vowel, followed by at least one or more consonant, like the word for and car. And you'll quickly realize that these vowels in these words do not represent their short vowel sound, right? Think about that. Think about the word car and the word for. Again, they can very quickly look like those closed syllables, right? And because it's got that vowel here, that A here, and then it's closed in by a consonant. Same thing here, vowel closed in by a consonant. So this can look like a closed syllable, but they represent a completely different syllable type known as R-controlled vowels. So when you're first teaching students to map closed syllable words, avoid using words that are followed by an R and are actually R-controlled vowels because they need to be taught differently and really, really explicitly. So when you're teaching closed syllable, stay away from words that have any R-controlled syllable in it. Really, really important. Let's talk about irregular high-frequency words because they're going to come up, right? So when we're talking about closed syllables, of course, you might have one or two students that raise their hand and say, what about this one? What about this one? What about this one? You'll always have it. So let's say we're talking about the word was. Let's word map the word was. Mapping irregular high-frequency words is a good idea, and you can use them and do this activity as a heart word, learning the hard parts or irregular parts by heart. So if we're thinking about the word was, students will repeat the word was, and we'll say now was is a closed syllable, but it doesn't have that a sound in it, right? That short a that we learned. So it's an irregular high frequency word. Now you're only going to do maybe one or two of these. You're not going to do a bunch all at one time. Let's talk about the word was. Do a typical word mapping activity. Repeat the word was. Let's tap out the sounds. Z. There are 3 sounds in the word was. We're going to push up our counters. We have 3 sounds in the word was. Now let's push up as we say each phoneme. Z. Was. So what letter makes the w sound? W. Good. That's a typical sound of W, the w sound. Now, what I might do, because they might not know this middle sound here, because they might come up with the short U or a U here, I might go to the end and say, hey, do you remember when we talked about that sometimes the S makes the Z sound in words? That's what you'll see here. So this last sound in the word was is an S, but it makes that Z sound. Now, if I explicitly taught that and they already know that S can make the Z sound, I am not going to make this a heart part. But if they didn't learn it, I'm going to have to teach both of these parts as a heart part. But I'm only going to teach this part. Now, this part in the word was is the hard part, the tricky part. It doesn't follow the rules that we've learned so far. The inside of the word was, or the sound inside of the word was, is actually an A, z. But it doesn't have the or a sound, so we call this the heart part, or the hard part, because we have to learn it by heart. We have to remember it by heart, and that we call these heart words, because this is the part we have to learn by heart. We have to remember it. So you can still map these irregular high frequency words by pointing out the irregular part in the word and making it a heart word, knowing the part we have to learn by heart. And that's how you do an irregular high frequency word. So you could still map those known sounds that follow regular phonetic patterns and then mark these irregular parts that don't follow typical phonic sound and are irregular by using the heart method. That's how I like to do irregular high frequency words. And then of course you have to do many of them because there are many high frequency words that are irregular, but many are not. So it's important to know which ones are irregular and which ones aren't. But you could still do a word mapping activity with an irregular high frequency word. Again, you wouldn't want to introduce more than 1 or 2 of these at a time in a single session because it's just too confusing for them. But you can word map irregular high frequency words. So that wraps up this crash course in word mapping with the closed syllable type. Remember, understanding the nuances in this syllable type will really, really help you better guide your students as they navigate their early reading journey. It's just so important. Now, I know we covered a lot today, so feel free to rewatch this video when you encounter some of these patterns in words and you're teaching them to your students. Also, feel free to share this video with your colleagues. We don't know what we don't know. I say that all the time. I don't know what I don't know. So seeing these quick demonstrations like this can really help round out your knowledge of the English code. Definitely join us in our next video when we are jumping into mapping the magic E or the VCE syllable type in our next video. Again, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you got some little nuggets out of it to bring it back to your own classroom. And definitely don't forget to check out the freebies in the description. I've got a word map for you down there. You can find your word mapping paddle link down there. And then of course, don't forget about our new product that's coming out soon, our word building kits. Again, this is just a prototype. We don't have the final word building board yet, but we will very soon. So definitely check that link out as well in the description below. So thank you so much again for watching. Remember to click that little subscribe button and that little bell next to it so you're alerted when my next video goes live talking about the VCE or Magic E syllable type. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.